Please call the roll.
Representing Educational District 1, Ms. Katie Howard.
Present.
Representing Educational District 2, Mr. Retta Baldwin.
Present.
I do also want to acknowledge that we have Brian Hawkins, Earl Fagan, Roland Edwards, and Shelby Nelson, our community advisors who are all present. And I also want to acknowledge our superintendent, Dr. Battle, and I know that our general counsel will be here sooner than, okay. And then I also want to acknowledge our executive director of internal audit. With that being said, we do have a quorum for the meeting. As we move forward, can we get an approval of the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in
Aye.
favor? Aye. Done. And then the minutes from the last meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes.
And then, Howard, are you seconding that?
Actually, I'm going to. Our last meeting was December 14th.
Yeah.
Our last meeting was December 14th, so we're approving the minutes from that meeting. You made a motion, I second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, and now we'll move into the election of committee chair, who would then move us further along in this meeting. Is there a nomination for chair?
I have been chair, and now I'm the chair of the Budget Commission. So I nominate Retta Baldwin to be chair of the Audit Committee.
That gives me two. I guess I'll second it.
So there's been a nomination. Are we closing on said name? Is there a motion to close on said name?
I make a motion to
Second.
to nominate Retta Baldwin as chair of the Audit Committee.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair Baldwin, you didn't seem too excited.
I'm so
Motion
excited.
passes unanimously. Chair Baldwin, I'll now turn it over to you to turn it over to Connie.
I actually am really excited because this is the best committee in the district to work on because we have the most amazing staff helping us out, as well as community advisors bringing the expertise. So it is my honor and pleasure to accept the role. Thank you. So Connie, you got some stuff for us to talk about?
Just a little bit.
Okay.
So thank you, Chair Baldwin. This afternoon, we plan to present the annual comprehensive financial report for year-end June 30, 2023. We'll follow that by a presentation of our student services audit by our plant and mooring partners. So at this time, I'm going to invite Doug Moses, who's a partner with Malden & Jenkins, to the podium, and he will present our annual financial statements.
You already know. All right, thanks for having me here today to present the audit results. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at the ACFR in detail. I know it's a big report, as well as the SPLOS performance audit, and then the ADA or Auditor's Discussion and Analysis is what I'll be presenting from today. But if you have any questions as I'm going through, you can stop and ask, or we can address those questions at the end. Right. Am I in control? Okay, thanks, all right. Go to the next slide. So just a quick update about Malden & Jenkins. We've been around for over 100 years. We've audited over 650 governments in the Southeast. 150 of those governments received the GFOA Award in Excellence in Financial Reporting, and APS is amongst that number. We actually have 14 offices in 6 states, and the latest edition was in Raleigh, North Carolina. And again, I was the partner responsible for the overall audit engagement with over almost 25 years of experience. This year I had a different partner to do the quality control review, Trey Scott. He's the partner in charge of our Savannah office, and he has about probably 17 years of experience, if not more. And then, of course, we had other staff, managers and seniors and staff, associates on the audit engagement as well. As far as the financial statements, the responsibility for the financial statements is management responsibility. Our responsibility is to give an opinion that the financial statements are materially correct. We've issued an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion, is what you would hope to get from the external audit. Go to the next slide. As far as the report on the 2023 federal award programs or the single audit report, again, that's included within your ACFR towards the back of the ACFR report. We did audit 2 programs, the elementary, secondary school relief fund, as well as the COVID emergency connectivity fund. Those 2 programs amounted to about 56% or $94 million of the total federal expenditures as of June 30, 2023 of $169 million. And we've issued clean opinions on those programs, though there are no exceptions as it relates to the compliance requirements for those 2 programs. As far as the SPLOS performance audit, we did look at, your Fulton SPLOS and your DeKalb SPLOS programs. We looked at 85 expenditures, 60 from your Fulton SPLOS and 25 from DeKalb SPLOS programs, and all were expended on allowable costs in accordance with the SPLOS referendums for each of those programs. We did look at 9 SPLOS contracts that were entered into during fiscal year 2023, and again, no issues there, proper board approval, proper procurement approval, things of that nature. So no exceptions. Next. As far as the compliance report, again, this is sometimes referred to as the Yellow Book report or GAS report, the Government Auditing Standards report. And again, this is a report on your internal controls. We're not required to provide an opinion on those internal controls, but an understanding of the controls in place. We didn't have any findings that were on a financial statement level that were cited within this report as well. And then down below is some audit procedures that we perform. This is just a snippet of that, not all inclusive, but we confirm receivables, cash, investments, and other audit elements of the audit. We also vouch substantiated additions of capital assets, balances of construction in progress, and then we also vouch significant retainage payables or contracts payables. And then we also perform a search of unreported liabilities at year end, make sure you have proper cutoff as it relates to those payables as reported at June 30. As far as significant accounting policies, the district did implement a new accounting policy as it relates to GASB 96, which deals with the accounting and reporting of subscription-based IT arrangements. And here you recognize a subita asset or a liability if it's deemed to be significant or material, if those terms exceed a one-year term. And so the district did implement a policy that addresses this new standard. And it's very similar to GASB 87 dealing with leases. As far as our relationship with management, we receive full cooperation from management staff and others. There are no disagreements with management on accounting issues or financial reporting matters. As far as audit adjustments, there were no unrecorded or past audit adjustments, meaning that anything that came to our attention, those entries were recorded and reflected in the district general ledger as well as in its financial statements. We did have some audit adjustments, some that were proposed by management and then some that were proposed by us that are included in the back of this report. As far as our audit independence, as it relates to the school system and its reporting, financial reporting process, we were independent in accordance with AICPA professional standards. There were no fees paid to Martin Jenkins for any type of management advisory services that would have impacted our independence as your external auditor. All right, next slide kind of looks at a couple of financial trends over the last 10 years. This first one is looking at your net position or equity and change in net position, net income or loss over the last 10 years for your governmental activities. Again, this is taking all of your fund balances or your trial balances on a full accrual basis of accounting. You're reflecting capital assets, long-term debt, things of that nature. And so, of course, you know, the obvious huge decline in your net position in 2014, which was expected. This is when governments had to recognize GASB 68, dealing with the accounting and reporting of your pension. You all have 2 pension plans, your local plan that with the city of Atlanta, as well as the PRS. And so that brought your net position down from $1.4 billion in 2014 down to $498 million in 2015. Then you can see it started increasing, and then of course we had to recognize GASB 75, dealing with the accounting and reporting of other post-employment benefits that you participate with Department of Community Health. And so you can see that brought your net position down from 548 million in 2016 down to 122 million in 2017. And then from there was no other major GASB standard that impacted government's net position like those two did. And so you can see your net position continue to increase since then, hitting 475 million in 2021, 742 million in 2022, and 835 million in 2023. So your net position increased $93 million this year that we audited, 2023. Now that's not as a big of an increase compared to 2022, which was about 266 million. And the reason for that was that the net pension liabilities increased significantly from 2022 to 2023, about 649 million, then offset by increases in your net in your revenues for that year. So that's why your change in net position was not as big as it was in 20. When you look at the breakdown of your net position, and you had about $1.3 billion invested in capital assets, net of related debt. You had about 262 million restricted for capital projects and state and local programs. And then you had a deficit, unrestricted net position amount of about 766 million. And then that's kind of expected for a lot of governments, especially school districts. You having to recognize your OPEB and pension liabilities. However, that deficit in unrestricted net position did improve over 2022. 2022, you had about an $815 million deficit unrestricted net position. This year is down to 7. All right. Next slide. Of course, your general fund is your main operating fund of the district. Your general fund balance did increase by $35 million over 2022, going from 261 million to 296 million as of 2023. A good rule of thumb for June 30 governments is to have 2 to 3 months reserve, or anywhere from 17 to 25%. You can see you all have exceeded that over the last several years. 29% in 2022, 30% in 2023, and those numbers reflect that you all did not have to get a tax anticipation note after year end to get you through those subsequent months until your property tax. So good job in protecting your fund balance and having a strong fund balance. And so again, these are good numbers for the district, and you continue to improve. So hats off for great job done. All right, so we didn't have any findings that were deemed to be material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. Management worked very hard to make sure that the records are in great shape to be audited. So again, hats off to your finance and accounting team, Lisa, Tanisha, Jerry, and all the staff doing a great job. We did have 2 management points or recommendations for improvement. This first one deals with P cards, and this has kind of been a repeat management point. We looked at a total of 60 P card transactions during fiscal year 2023, and 39 of the 60 did not have that second layer of approval. And so that is a high exception rate, just looking at 60 transactions and noting that 39 of them did not have that second level of approval. So we want to make sure that all of your P card transactions are being properly approved at the initial level as well as secondary level. And then we noticed 5 of the 60 did not have any approval at all. And so if you continue to have like repeat offenders, you might look to remove them as authorized P card users. Next slide. During our testing of capital assets and our discussions with management, we noted that there was some capital asset activity from the previous year that had the wrong in-service date, which resulted in depreciation being not calculated in the right period. And so that resulted in a $963,000 decrease in construction in progress and about a $3.7 million increase in depreciation for your equipment. The net effect of this was not deemed to be material at the government-wide level, and so we passed on restating beginning balances, and so the correction was made during the fiscal year 2023 activity. And so we just recommend management continues to look at that the in-service dates on the assets that are being recorded to make sure that the depreciation is being calculated in the proper period. Next slide, we continue to have our government advisory services that are performed for a lot of governments, where governments can have an operational assessment done. And so you can see the various core offerings that are offered by our governmental practice. Next slide. And then also we have a IT cybersecurity practice as well. I tell you, in light of some of the cyber attacks that we hear about that's affecting companies and governments across the nation, might be a good idea, if you all haven't had one done in recent years, consider having an IT cybersecurity audit done. One of your neighboring school districts actually just put out an RFP to have such an audit done, and so it's something to consider if y'all haven't had one done in recent years. GASB continues to be busy with new GASB pronouncements. Nothing significant like the last two dealing with 96 and 87, but these are some new ones that will be affecting your current fiscal year that you're in and subsequent fiscal years. We've talked with management about these. This won't be any major impacts on your financial statement balances, but it's going to improve your footnote disclosures to your financial statement. Next slide. One more. All right, we continue to offer free continuing education classes for our clients, again, free of charge. These have been done virtually over the last several years since the pandemic. We actually just had one yesterday, and a repeat of that will be taught on Monday, and your staff have participated in those courses, and I believe you all have hosted, prior to the pandemic, you all had hosted one of those classes here at your facilities years ago as well. But again, you can see the various topics that are being taught, and so if you want to be invited to any of these classes, just let me know, and we'll get you on that invite list. But that kind of concludes my presentation. Again, it was an honor and pleasure to provide auditing services to the school districts, and you continue to be a great client. So again, hats off to everyone for doing a great job.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I see Pierre's checking online. Katie, do you have any? So I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
In regards to P cards, so we've seen it look a lot worse. So that's awesome. But I have a question in regards to processes and protocols. How are those who have P cards trained? And then tell me about that secondary approval and what we can do moving forward to ensure that everyone knows the proper approvals that are necessary. But I do want to highlight that we don't see, and I don't know if maybe you just weren't measuring for this, but we didn't see split charges. So there are some things that we're not seeing that we have seen in the past. And so this does look like an improvement from what we've seen, but this wasn't a P card only audit. So that's kind of two questions, one for Connie and one for Dr. Bracken.
Well, I guess before Lisa comes up, our team, after discussions last year, we decided to hold off on continuing with any P card audits until some more training was done and in reaction to some of the audit findings that Mulder and Jenkins have. So we haven't looked at it probably in about a year and a half.
So this scope would not have included that piece of?
We haven't looked at it.
Okay.
Yes, I will add that our P-card team is fully staffed now, and we do have a lot of practices in place that we've implemented since the last time that Connie's team did audit that area. And so we're still looking for things like split charges, for inappropriate spend. We're sending those letters to to the P card owners and also management if we see anything like that, and are watching it from that perspective. I will say on the signatures, we're noodling an idea there. What we're seeing a lot is, just like for me, if I use my P card, the supervisor to sign off is Dr. Battle, and I don't want to bring her my paper purchases, right? And so we see the same thing for principals who might be using their P cards in a school and then going to Associate Soups to do the sign off on that. So we're looking at an idea where it is just the bookkeepers in the schools that have access to the P cards, and the principal is the sign off on that. So my special projects coordinator has the P card. I don't use a P card, and then I am authorizing her purchases so that we can have that two-way approval where the person at the top who would be doing the approval has the P card in their name. There isn't that second line of approval in the building. Because the other thing is an associate signing off on a principal's P cards, they don't know what's actually being purchased either way. So we do think that that's a better way to approach it, and we're looking at that idea for implementation for next year, which we think will help with this sign-off process.
Thank you. I appreciate you looking deeper than just what's happening, but why is this happening and what can we do to be in compliance. So thank you. Pierre, were there any questions from our community members? Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Doug. Moving along, we're going to ask Matthew and Caroline to join us. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We do
Would you
have a question.
Hold up for a moment, Doug.
Doug, don't leave yet, Doug. There is a question for you. Please return to the podium. And Earl, you have the floor. Thank you. Did we lose him? Okay, maybe it was a false alarm. We just wanted you to do another lap.
I need the exercise.
Thank you. We may have a question to follow up with you later. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, we're going to move ahead with the presentation for our student services audit. So Matthew Bowden and Caroline Main with Plant Moran are going to join us at the podium.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for giving us the opportunity today to present the results of our student services internal audit. Why don't we go ahead and move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So we're going to keep this deliberately brief for you. This is a summary of the report that we previously provided to the board. Overall today, what we'll go through is just some team introductions or reintroductions of your internal audit leadership team from Plant Moran. We're going to talk about our internal audit overview, the purpose and scope of the audit, the objectives of the audit. We're going to go over themes and observations from our fieldwork procedures, and of course, summary overview of the results. Happy to address any and all questions that you may have. We may not have the answer right at the outset, but if we don't, we're happy to go back, take another look, and get you the answer that you need promptly. So real quick on introductions. So Troy Snyder, engagement partner, unfortunately had a conflict today. He was not able to join us in person. He is here listening in. So he's happy to be here in support of this internal audit. I'm Matt Bowden. I'm principal in our Risk and Accounting Advisory Services practice. Troy and I lead our public sector and K-12 practice in Caroline, Maine. I'll introduce you'll be hearing plenty from her in a moment. She's a senior manager in our practice and was the fieldwork lead for this internal. Before we go into specific results, I do want to thank everybody that participated in this internal audit. It's not easy to be subject to an internal audit. It can be a little intimidating for folks, but we were met with acceptance and support of everybody with whom we spoke. And we got the sense that it's a very open and there's a commitment to getting better and commitment to improvement. So with all that said, I'm gonna hand it to Caroline to take us through the specifics of the audit. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So we'll start off with just a brief overview of our internal audit objectives and scope. So the objective of our audit was to evaluate the student services function across all non-charter system schools for the 2022-2023 school year. We did take a risk-based selection of 30 schools. That included high schools, middle schools, as well as elementary schools. And our audit objectives were really focused around student attendance, student academics, and student discipline. We did look at district policy, I compared that against board policy, as well as the Georgia Department of Education regulations. We also looked at training related to these areas, as well as reviewed sample documentation. Additionally, we facilitated interviews with school administration. Those interviews were with primarily principals and assistant principals, as well as attendance clerks and some others in certain cases as well. We identified internal controls throughout the process, and then lastly, identified gaps and recommendations to mitigate risk, and that is captured throughout our findings that we will cover in more detail. Okay. So just to cover a few different themes we noted through the audit. The first one relates to retention of student records and documentation. So we did note that Infinite Campus is not being consistently used to document information related to student attendance and discipline. This did result in some cases where the evidence that we needed to obtain to perform our audit objectives was not able to be provided to us. Secondly, student discipline policy and practices. So first being that administrators and teachers use discretion when identifying appropriate progressive discipline interventions, supports, and responses in alignment with district policy. That sometimes did result in some judgment being applied as far as that discretion when they're determining intervention and support outcomes. And then secondly, discipline training is offered to principals, but not teachers and administrative staff. So training also did not address all key elements of the district policy. So this kind of gap in the training also potentially could lead to some judgment being applied in discipline outcomes as well. And then the third theme here relates to the student discipline support system. First item being disciplinary programs differ across schools, which may lead to inequitable discipline outcome for students. For example, some schools have in-school suspension programs while others do not. And then secondly, the number and type of support staff varies from school to school. For example, number of counselors, behavioral specialists, non-instructional aides does vary from school to school. That said, we did note, just last comment there. That said, we did note that from our interviews, the schools did not express that they had concerns over their support structure for students and staff, but we did think that that was worth noting that there are some differences there. Okay, so just to provide kind of a brief overview of our findings. In total, we had 17 findings, 3 of which were high priority, those related to discipline. 11 were moderate priority. Those did include all areas: discipline, attendance, access provisioning, and academic record keeping. And then lastly, low priority, there were 3 findings. Our presentation today really just focuses on the high and moderate priority. The additional 3 low priority items we excluded just in the interest of time, but those are found in the full report that the board has access to. Okay. And please feel free to stop me throughout if there are any questions. I'll kind of try to pause after each slide, but don't hesitate to ask questions throughout. So starting off here with our first 3 high priority findings, Like I said, these relate to discipline. The first finding relates to the completion of the optional student discipline learning plan for principals and assistant principals is not enforced. Our recommendation here is for district administration to enforce and monitor completion deadlines for the student discipline learning plan. Next, the optional student discipline training does not address all aspects, all key aspects of the student code of conduct. And we recommend that the student discipline learning plan is updated so that it includes modules that address all key aspects of the student code of conduct, specifically related to discipline. And then last high priority finding was related to student names found in behavior reports, which potentially could result in FERPA violations. For this, we recommend reinforcing expectations to comply with FERPA during student discipline related training. Really the recommendation here is for those full student names to not be included in those reports to reduce the risk of a potential violation. And then secondly, behavior administrators should review behavior referrals that already exist within Infinite Campus and remove any identifiable student information, again, to reduce the risk of any issues in the future. Okay. Moving into moderate priority findings, the first few here relate to discipline. The first one, student discipline training for teachers is inconsistent across schools. The Office of Student Discipline should develop and deliver a district-wide student discipline training program. Our next finding is related to student behavior reports not being filed promptly. We recommend that the district administration reinforces the responsibility to file student behavior referrals within 1 day in accordance with the policy. And then third here, discrepancies were identified between the student behavior reports filed and the guidance per the 2022-23 student handbook and student code of conduct. We recommend considering revising the student handbook to ensure consistency and clarity of responses to disciplinary offenses, as well as district administration should reinforce the expectation for adherence to these guidelines through training and monitoring. A couple additional moderate findings related to discipline. Notification to a parent or legal guardian of the student's behavior incident was not consistently documented in Infinite Campus. We encourage district administration to reinforce this expectation for both teachers and administrators to adhere to the notification guidelines established in the handbook. We did note that there are some automated notifications going out that may be captured elsewhere within Infinite Campus. So just working to ensure that those automated notifications as well are captured in the contact log so that there's clear, documentation that the policy was followed. Additionally, I mentioned the next one in our themes, but some schools do have in-school suspension programs while others do not, which could create some potential for inequitable discipline outcomes for students. We recommend evaluating whether additional schools within the district might benefit from an in-school suspension program, just to ensure that all students within the same grades do have appropriate disciplinary responses available. Okay. I'll pause. Any questions so far?
Are there any questions online, Pierre? Okay, Board Member Brooks?
Hi, thank you so much for doing this audit. I have a question as to whether or not there is a list of schools that do have the in-school suspension option and which schools do not, as well as any data on whether how often out-of-school suspensions are being utilized in the schools without, in comparison to the schools that have the option, and whether or not discipline is being used, like what the actual data points are on that.
Absolutely. To answer your first question, we do have a list of the schools that indicated through our interviews that they do not have an in-school suspension program. So I can certainly pull that list and provide that following this meeting. To answer your second question, I will also have to get back to you on that. Reviewing that data as far as whether the in-school suspension programs are being fully utilized, that was not part of what we reviewed in the audit, but we can certainly look into that and see if that's something that the district would be able to provide.
Thank you. Is there also any data on how that is, discipline is being enforced along the lines of age, grade level, race, gender? Are we able to pull any data on that as well?
Yeah, we, part of what we did review, so the district is performing some analytics and review over trends in some of the discipline data that I imagine is what you're asking about. So we did review that. We also did perform some additional analytics on our own. Any trends that we noted are captured through our findings, so there's nothing in addition to that. But we can certainly collaborate with Connie Brown and see if there's additional data that can be provided following this meeting.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Board Member Howard?
I think my questions, actually, I'll save them for the end
Okay.
because I have them for the district. So, but I appreciate Board Member Brooks asking about data, which I know the district has, but understanding you all are finding where there are gaps and certainly recording information.
And I'm going to hold my questions
Okay.
until the end as well.
Okay, great. Okay, so moving into just a few other areas here, I just wanted to make sure we weren't getting too far in if there were questions on the discipline. So we've kind of gotten through the discipline findings so far. So moving in, a couple moderate findings related to student attendance. The first one being that evidence of attendance protocols performed for excessive unexcused absences was not consistently documented in Infinite Campus. Again, going back to the theme of lack of documentation in Infinite Campus. So our recommendations here first would be for the attendance clerk or designee to review Infinite Campus daily for students who have accumulated unexcused absences and perform the attendance protocols or escalate to the responsible staff. Second would be for the attendance clerk or designee to review Infinite Campus weekly and ensure performance of attendance protocols is documented. Second finding here relates to schools not monitoring attendance record modifications to ensure modifications are appropriate and authorized. We recommend that school personnel who do not have access to enter attendance records perform a periodic review over these modifications to ensure that they're appropriate. Okay, one finding related to access provisioning. This one is that Infinite Campus access provisioning and modification requests were not approved and/or explanations for access changes were not consistently documented in Infinite Campus or Microsoft Power Apps. In this case, the access provisioning and changes does flow through Microsoft Power Apps, so just to clarify that. And our recommendation here is that all Infinite Campus access modifications or additions should be independently approved and documented. Again, the current process would be to do so through Microsoft Power Apps. Okay, and then the last finding related to academic record keeping. Evidence of approval for grade changes was not received from schools for most samples tested. This is another process where the approval actually takes place outside of Infinite Campus. Again, the approval flows through Microsoft Power Apps, so I think that contributed to some of the issues here is that approval is outside of the system, so pulling that documentation and making sure that the changes that were made were in fact approved. There seemed to be a disconnect there. So our recommendation here would be to perform a quarterly user access review to ensure that the ability to record grade changes in Infinite Campus is limited to the Chief Accountability Officer's designee for each school. Okay, and then just a final note here on next steps. So we've been collaborating with management. You've all seen in the report the management responses. So the next steps would be for management to move forward with implementing those action plans in accordance with the deadlines that were agreed upon. And then second, internal audit is going to be performing follow-up remediation audits during the next several months and into the next school year. So that will be the next step here. Once management has implemented the recommendations, would be for internal audit to perform a follow-up audit and confirm that they have been implemented. Okay.
Now, I believe we have some more questions. Let's start with those online, and then we'll move to folks in the building. All right, Board Member Brooks, if you'll give us a different emoji if you have a new question, we'll come back to you. Board Member Howard?
Thank you for this report, and I think my questions really are more for our staff, if you all are ready. Aretta, I can hold off on asking those questions if you have some for the audit team.
I think the majority of my questions are for the staff as well. The audit team may have some input to ask, but my questions are more looking forward versus looking back. But I do want to say that we have seen, and I'm not sure exactly where, that there certainly have been some inequities in our student discipline. And this is a step forward in naming some of those challenges and then rectifying the situation. I'm going to ask this question, but if you want me to pause, then we can go back that. This is the 22-23 school year rate. Is it correct that, when did you come on board, Chelsea?
I got discipline records July 1st of this year.
Okay, so we are now currently in, I just want to highlight that we are in we have a new structure and probably some new protocols and processes that have been put into place since that was done. So please feel free to highlight that with the questions that are coming forward. So I'm going to pause, go to Board Member Howard, and then I'll come back if she doesn't ask all my questions.
Thank you, and I appreciate that as well, Retta. That this is full transparency. We know there's work to be done, but you've got to figure out what's going on first, which is another reason I love this committee.
Yes, it's the best committee ever. Look under the hood.
And then bringing in folks who have expertise in this area. Well, I know Retta and I have a lot of questions, and I know y'all are expecting them. So just looking at the disproportionality in the way discipline practices are applied. Let's start there. In-school suspension versus out-of-school suspension. And we also know that schools have autonomy for good reason, but how do we support them in using that autonomy in the right way and supporting our students, also with the right staff? And then I'll pause there because you know I'm going to ask about the budget and how it all aligns.
So I'd say that's the biggest thing with in-school suspension is it requires a staff member. And the schools have the ability to choose to invest in an in-school suspension program or not, but it does usually come down to that one person is usually the difference. Some of the disproportionality we see from school to school is our training is pretty black and white. We don't really do a whole lot of norming. We need to. And if this is my third fight this school year, how many days of OSS did I get at one school versus another school? So we don't do that norming work that we need to do between schools. And again, I was thrilled for the opportunity to get this audit as I got this work, because now I get to see everything and tear it up that we need to work on. So we will be making quite a few adjustments to our trainings next year, and again, also them being required. That's a big thing as well. But the autonomous piece comes in really in, do you have OSS or not? And then what are your tier 1 structures and supportive management to support discipline in your school? We've never really written those down. This year's the first year that we have collected tier 1 behavior and attendance plans. We got most of them. This gives us a little more teeth to really lean into those for next year and understand what schools are doing at that tier 1, top of tier 2 level for both discipline and attendance. We haven't had that before until this year.
That is great to hear. And what are we seeing in terms of what is working in this space? Because we know there are huge problems with out-of-school suspension. But we also know we need to support in school in the right way for our students. And then also, I want to know about any recommended policy changes to the board.
So a lot of the changes that we need to make right now are in the code of conduct. You'll see that in these findings. We need to better align with the state. We need clearer visuals and matrices for schools to follow. It's kind of hard to use. We could make that easier. We do have work to do in that written part, but then as well as the training part. As far as what's working, to be totally transparent, I'm still getting my hands on everything we have. So we're doing a lot of collecting of what programs we have, looking at the impacts of those programs. We do have 17 schools doing PBIS. PBIS works, we know it does. So those, just a shout out to those 17 schools, and Tara Shelton is here as well. That work works. So leaning into that, continuing to support that, I think from the top down is gonna be really important. Next year we will have more support for schools that are interested in becoming PBIS schools, but without a doubt, if you are PBIS and you support that teaching of behavior and expectations in your school, it makes a difference.
That's very helpful as well. And I'm thinking about our guardrail around equity, and then, which is extremely important, and not allowing there to be inequitable environments for our students in terms of supports. So going back to the budget as we plan 2025, like really seeing what it will require to fully support PBIS, and other things, recommendations I feel like are going to be forthcoming as you understand more what's happening within the district to support and what really needs to be done. I have some other questions as well, but I'm going to pause there because I know Retta has a lot, and we'll end up taking each other's questions.
Not necessarily a lot, but a few. So, training and monitoring, basically, I heard that, and it sounds like that is incredibly important. And I just want to make sure that our training is actually impactful and not just checking a box. So I look forward to what that training looks like versus me just sitting and have a computer voice read to me, click, 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 okay, I'm done. But something that's, like I said, is going to be impactful, engaging. The other thing that popped up a lot is documentation. And so we spend a lot of money on Infinite Campus. And so are those documentation problems because people don't know how to use the system, because there are system limitations? What is it that we're seeing? And the reason why this is so important to me is oftentimes attendance is an indicator to other issues and other problems. And if we can get to that student then, when we see that there's attendance problems before it elevates to something else, then we would be doing everyone a great service. So what is the issue with Infinite Campus?
Sure, yeah. Thank you for the question, Board Member Baldwin. It's really less about the limitations of the technology and more about, like we said, just additional and continued training, and then the monitoring and the follow-up monitoring from both the designee on the ground and those secondary, designees. So it more is along the lines of, and within the plans that we implement those monitoring pieces at the school level, but then also do those quarterly checks as well to ensure that we are following our own protocols.
And I'm just going to say again how important it is that our students are actually in classes. You can't learn if you're not in the class. And if you're not in the class, that means you're somewhere else with idle hands that could be doing something else. So this is incredibly important, and please let me know if there's something else that you need from the board in terms of supporting this, or how we can elevate how important it is that folks aren't just trained, but they really do embody what it is that they get with that training.
1,000%, and we are sincerely grateful for support and continued support.
Okay. Yep, going back to Katie.
So attendance clerks, they're a huge part of that. Who has attendance clerks? Because does every school have one? I mean, and not necessarily that they need to have one, but this is an example of there's differences throughout the system.
Right, yeah, with the autonomy and flexibility, not every school has that attendance clerk function. They have a designee that acts in that capacity. But they do not all have, and that leads to then, ensuring unified understanding, because you're gonna have, different staff, with different designations that are getting that training and acting in that capacity.
Because we know educators have a lot they're doing already, and making sure that, like Retta's saying, we put in place a training that's meaningful, but like you've got the right people doing that work. So that goes back to kind of the presentation we had today around people. So this is all really good to think about as we move forward with the 2025 budget. But yeah, hearing, you all's recommendations, like Aretta said, how we can support this area. We've got to have accurate data on attendance, but of course we know what it takes to also get kids into school. That goes to social workers, that goes to support systems, all those things we have got to fund properly with the right people. So I'm glad we're focusing in on the importance of getting accurate attendance data, as well as obviously discipline data, because it's critically important that we focus in on this area, because students can't learn to the full potential if they're not supported in school. So thank you so much. I think those are my questions, right?
Pierre, do we have any questions from Board Member Brooks or our community? I knew he would. Board Member Brooks, it's back on you.
Thank you, Board Member Bowman. I just wanted to elevate, as somebody who has to utilize Infinite Campus, how much of a challenge it could be that if you make a phone call or you send an email to a parent to then have to go into Infinite Campus and then enter in another data set on that platform as well, it's like such a duplication of work. And it does end up creating a lot of barriers for educators who are, trying to do their due diligence to reach out to a parent, but then you got to do an extra step to reach out or to document that you reached out. It is so antiquated. And then on top of that, to even keep track of student attendance for an administrator and at the, kind of macro school level, it would be so much more helpful if we had a system that had more of a dashboard that allowed you to track where attendance for students, grades for students, discipline for students, where they live in the community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there is new technology coming online throughout the country where this is happening. And I would encourage us to start exploring what it would look like to be able to have those type of dashboards so we could be more nimble and responding to these needs.
Thank you for that perspective.
Thank you, Board Member Brooks. Just want to let you know that we are bringing that right after spring break. We're bringing to the board a request for a new attendance support system. And so again, as you asked, what can the board do? So we're looking for funding related to that system, which will do exactly what you described, have a dashboard to be able to understand which kids, attendance, all of those things. So we're excited about bringing that forth. So we look forward to your support.
Hopefully there's money for that, Dr. Brecken.
Amen.
I have a thumbs up from Lindsay Evans back there.
That would definitely be exciting to see. And the input from Board Member Brooks is very valuable. So if we have not already, if we haven't done focus groups with those on the ground who are using these programs and experiencing these challenges, I would encourage us to talk to them firsthand about what are the challenges that lead to why some of these things aren't happening, that could help us come up with some actionable recommendations on how we can make it easier.
I think that will be the perfect kind of check when we do a check-in on how the new training go, how are the record keeping going. I think to do focus groups would be a great way for us to get that kind of round two of information.
Excellent. Are there any other questions? Katie, Board Member Howard.
Real quickly, and I know I'm getting in the weeds, but the dashboard, I'm talking about a new system, but don't we have dashboards we're working on for our schools right now? Like, how do those?
So as far as attendance work is concerned, and I see as attendance and behavior as complementary. We have great relationships, kids will be in school. So I see them as really going together. So what we currently have is we follow what our policy is and what the state looks at as average daily attendance. That's not the best way to look at attendance. We really don't capture all of our chronic absenteeism. And to Board Member Brooks' point, we don't have those by zip code. We don't have that level to be able to intervene faster and be able to get to support faster, especially in attendance. Attendance is very reactive, it's very truancy focused, and we just need to do a really big shift as a district to turn that upside down. And this, what's coming to you after spring break to the board meeting is kind of step one. So we have everything we need to get rolling, help with rewrite the policy, and really look at attendance in that way. Discipline-wise, we do have an excellent dashboard. So on the discipline side of the work, the dashboard is really, really good. It breaks down by any way you could want to look at it. We're set there, but attendance is just a little harder. It's not just about, were you there, were you not? You really have to dig deeper for attendance.
That's a real helpful explanation. Just want to make sure we're not layering on that, these two things are needed. And I have seen some of that discipline dashboard data, which is extremely helpful. And I can see a difference now than in the past. So thank you.
The attendance item is actually it's an intervention while doing no work, which is the best of interventions.
And TAPL is just the data information on whether kids are in school.
Right.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions in this area? Seeing that there are none, thank you so much to both of y'all.
Thank
or actually
you.
all 5 of y'all. Connie, I believe it's on you.
It is. Pierre, if you would pull up my presentation. No. Okay. Thank you very much. On to the next portion, the update for the Office of Internal Compliance for this quarter. In our presentation this afternoon, we will provide an update on the audit plan for school year 2024, followed by an update on the district's plan to address record retention deficiencies. Lindsay Evans, our Executive Director for Federal Programs, will also join us to provide an update on the remediation efforts related to our recent federal programs cross-monitoring assessment performed by the Georgia Department of Education. Our report out will conclude with an update on our ethics and compliance concerns since our last meeting. Since our last meeting, and you just heard this, we did complete the student services audit, our MCAAF audit, the Office of Employee Experience and Performance audit, our governance audit, and our risk assessment project are all in process and are on track to be completed within our estimated budget and timeline. Our MCAAF audits is a mouthful, but those are basically our student activity account audits at the schools. We started conducting our audits in February of this year, and to date, we've completed about 73% of our schools. That's about 43 right now. 43 of those audits have been completed, and our goal is to have all the audits completed by mid-May and ready for report out to the board, to the audit committee in June. So we plan to have a summary dashboard for the audit committee to review and some recommendations as well. For our Office of Employee Experience and Performance, that's formerly OER, our fieldwork is complete and we are in the reporting phase right now. We are currently reviewing management responses to our audit findings, and we expect that audit report to be ready and presented at our June meeting as well. For our risk assessment process, the risk assessment data is currently under review within the department, and we are working to draft the audit plan for school year 2025. The risk assessment and proposed audit plan for school year 2025 will be presented during the audit committee meeting in June. Next, we have our governance audit, which we just kicked off, so the internal preliminary planning has been started. And again, that one we expect to be completed within budget as well by our friends at Plant Moran. Federal programs was scheduled to start in January, but I'd like to delay the discussion on why that hasn't been started until after we get an update from our Federal Programs Division a little later on in this process. So we'll circle back with that. In terms of special projects, we did receive a special request from the superintendent to conduct a review of special education services, specifically concerns around the timely identification of students for special education services and procedures for engaging families and determining the special education services needed for their children. After discussions with the previous audit chair, Howard, we decided to accept this request, and we will keep the committee updated as our work progresses in that line. Next are follow-up corrective action plans. We are continuing to work with our partners, Plant Moran, to follow up and validate open corrective action plans. The goal is to determine what's outstanding and validate as many of the remediated items as possible before the end of the school year. And again, results will be presented to the audit committee in our June meeting. But that process is underway right now. I talked fast, so at this point I'm going to pause and ask if there are any questions about anything that I've mentioned thus far.
Pierre, do we have any questions online?
Okay, great. So as noted in previous audit committee meetings, a recurring theme in several of our audits relates to record retention. The committee asked the superintendent to address this concern, and today I can share the district's plan regarding the APS records retention remediation plan. I do have some comments here that I'm going to share. We're fortunate that Dr. Battle is here and a few other senior leadership members in case there are questions that you guys might have. But at this point, I'm going to read I'm going to share that schedule with you. So on the screen, that is the plan. And due to multiple audit findings resulting from a lack of internal documentation, Dr. Battle has directed APS improve its record retention practices. As a result, the district has developed the following plan. First, legal has already reviewed the current APS records retention schedule and determined it to be legally compliant with all applicable laws. Again, this is already complete. Legal will additionally confer with APS divisions to determine whether additional categories of records should be included on the retention schedule in excess of the legal requirements and update the retention schedule accordingly. This will be completed by May 31st, 2024. In the meantime, compliance with the current and legal compliant retention schedule is key. Accordingly, the following steps are being taken. First, Dr. Battle has issued a written directive to all employees requiring that all APS records be retained on an APS-operated platform, along with the contents of the retention schedule. Second, because the retention schedule is massive, the administration, with legal's guidance, is creating targeted one-pagers for the respective divisions that highlight the categories of records most relevant for those divisions. These one-pagers will be communicated to the divisions by March 29, 2024. Additionally, legal will offer training for the divisions. Training, either remote or in person, will be completed by May 31st, 2024. Finally, APS currently has many different platforms on which documents may be saved. For instance, APS uses Infinite Campus, OneDrive, Lawson, SharePoint, Dropbox, Google Docs, and a shared drive for highly sensitive information. So a lot of platforms. Current practices negatively impact both retention of records and retrievability of those records. As APS is exploring a new ERP system, the district has an opportunity to refine and improve its retention practices. Accordingly, in conjunction with a potential new ERP system, the Performance Division will develop and implement a district-wide data governance standard operating procedure. The SOP will be designed to ensure appropriate retention of data and maximize the ease of retrieval. After all, it is of little value to retain data if it's not meaningfully retrieved. The Performance Division will need to consult with stakeholders from all divisions in this process. Development of this SOP will require co-creation throughout the district. Implementation will further require changes in practice in alignment with a potentially new ERP system. Given this, the timeline for completion is 9 to 12 months right now. This is the plan. If there are any questions from committee members, community advisors as it relates to this, we all know this has been a long time coming. We kind of talk about it every audit meeting, so I'm excited to see it.
I'm excited too. This looks great. Any questions, Pierre, from online? Board Member Howard, questions? All right, we're good. Thank you.
Great.
Many thanks.
If there are no further questions at this time, I would like to welcome Lindsay Evans, our Executive Director for Federal Programs, to the podium to share an update on the Federal Programs Corrective Action Plan update. So, welcome, Lindsay.
As a result of the findings received from the cross-functional monitoring conducted last February 6th. The updates are as follows. Indicator 5.1, internal controls, written procedure. The district did not meet evidence that written internal control procedures direct the financial management of the Title I program. To address the finding, federal programs revised our internal control policies and procedures in the following areas: allowability, procurement, conflict of interest, and stipend. The district also remitted a check for expenditures that were deemed unallowable. To ensure the department's written procedures are in alignment with federal and state guidelines, our manuals are updated annually, and as new information is presented by Georgia Department of Education, they are also updated. The team also participates in monthly check-ins as well as webinars provided by Georgia Department of Education. In addition to that, the department submits budget amendments more frequently to Godot for approval, allowability, and alignment to the initiatives and the plan. The next finding was indicator 5.2, which is inventory. It says the inventory logs included purchase equipment that was not reflected in the approved Title IV Part A budget by Georgia Department of Education. As a result of the finding, the department amends budgets on a more consistent basis and aligns the expenditures to allowable and allocable Title IV Part A initiatives. After the budget has been approved by Georgia Department of Ed, federal programs orders the budgeted items, and then the items are added to the inventory log by the school or the department. Please note that federal programs conducts inventory annually, just to ensure that everything is accurate. A check was also remitted for the questioned FY22 expenditure. However, the FY23 budgeted items were deemed approved by Georgia Department of Education. And the final finding was indicator 5.3, cash management. The district did not demonstrate compliance with requirements for the drawdown of funds and completion report submission. The FY22 Title I Part A general ledger provided by the district did not demonstrate a match to several function and object codes on the FY22 Title I completion report. To become compliant, the district revised written procedures for conducting drawdowns and completion reports and included the consolidation of federal funds. The written procedures include actions to be taken, information to be collected, timeline, and person or persons responsible for completing these actions. The district also submitted their FY23 financials to Georgia Department of Education, its Title I department, as well as their financial review department, and we successfully closed out FY23. Additionally, federal programs, budget, and accounting meet regularly to review the budgets, including the consolidated funds and the administrative funds. Also, federal programs and accounting meet monthly to review and discuss drawdowns. The district also submitted a check to Georgia Department of Education. We really believe that cross-collaboration has been instrumental in staying in compliance. The team meets regularly with departments in finance, as well as other divisions and schools throughout the district. Federal programs also works closely with Georgia Department of Education, and the team understands the importance of staying in compliance. And we've made great strides these past several months, and we plan to continue to do so.
Great news. And so you said we're paid up.
We are.
Great news.
Yeah.
Are there any questions from my colleagues online? Nope. Board Member Howard?
Just want to thank you all. I made a request for this update, so I really appreciate it. We know how important these funds are. And just making sure the right things are in place, right checks, and that, is support. So, Godot. Georgia Department of Education, anything you want to add? CFO Bracken?
I do. So Lindsay assumed the role in September, and the department moved to my division in September as well, only about 6 months ago. And so I can say the amount of collaboration just that I've seen in that period has been fantastic. It's been fantastic to be able to see the teams working together. We're coming up with creative solutions for budget. And that's been fantastic. Last shout out to the state, because as we've taken on these new roles, as I've tried to get up to speed on all things federal programs, the level of time and support that they've given us has just been outstanding. And so want to make sure that we give that shout out for that support as well.
And how long are we on this corrective action plan?
So we are actually on it until probably, for another year. We are actually going to be monitored by them in May. So we're hoping that if we have a successful monitoring this go around, we'll be off the high risk designation by Georgia Department of Ed.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll be back on the regular 5-year rotation. Yes.
Thank you for that update and for the progress.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. To move forward, I want to circle back, like I promised. Schedule. Federal programs was slated and it was approved for an audit for this year. I would like to recommend that the federal programs audit be removed from this year's schedule for a couple of reasons. First, the review coverage period would overlap with what the Georgia's Department of Education was doing, and they already found deficiencies that the department is working on. So not really seeing the value in having us come in and look at that same period again. So I would like to recommend that this audit be removed from this current year's audit plan. And Pierre, we need a vote for that approval, if you're in agreement.
So I believe both of us are in agreement because there's no need to duplicate work and spend money where you already know what the results are. So can we go ahead and have that, can I call for that motion, Pierre? Is there a motion to remove the federal programs grants management audit from the school year 2024 audit plan?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Motion passes.
Thank you. Just so you know that as we explore what our 2025 audit plan looks like, we will consider federal programs. But again, it looks like they're going to be monitored for the next year, so it may not be on the plan for next year either. So just so you know.
Quick question, with the removal of that audit, does that make space to move something else up, or does it just give you the time to manage the portfolio that is already in front of you?
Actually, it gives me more time to manage the portfolio in front of me. We did add the special education audit, and we're still refining that scope, so that may expand. And it also gives me more time for the follow-up corrective action plan project that we've got going on as well.
Okay, sounds good, thank you. We're real excited about the special education audit.
So I'm going to flip through to our last topic for discussion today, and that's our ethics and compliance. Again, just to reiterate, our concerns are received through multiple channels, the hotline, our Let's Talk application system, emails, telephone referrals, and depending on the nature of those concerns, our office may refer some of those reports to other APS departments. For the period December 1st through February 29th, 2024, we received 42 concerns, and 23 of those concerns were referred to the Office of Employee Experience and Performance. Outside the hotline, we received one additional concern, bringing our total number of concerns received and worked within our office to 20. Due to lack of actionable information, no investigations were undertaken for about 65% of those 20 reports. We did have one substantiated claim and 4 unsubstantiated claims, and 2 remained open as of the end of February, but I do believe one of those is already closed at the time of this meeting. So again, just wanted to provide an update on how we're managing the Ethics and Compliance Hotline, just in case you had any questions. If there are no other questions, that completes my presentation for this meeting. So I'll turn it back over to you, Board Chair Baldwin.
Do we have any questions from my colleagues online? Board Member Howard, do you have any questions? So from what you are talking about, it sounds like June is the next time that you will be prepared to come in front of us with presentations. Is that correct?
Yes, the third Thursday in June.
Okay, so if everyone could check the third Thursday in June at our same bat time, same bat station, we should be good to go on that. So June 20th? June 20th is the third Thursday in June. Mark your calendars. Pierre, do we have any public comment? No public comment. Well, if there's no public comment and all business has been handled, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.